Hello and welcome to 5 ways not to have an argument. And what I want to do in this video is to explore this from a bit of a different angle, from a slightly light-hearted angle, because although this is a serious subject, I think that this way that I'm going to explore it with you might help you to get some insight into what's going on. So I want to explore it from the angle of 5 ways to have an argument. How is it that we get into so many arguments? What is it that we do that gets arguments going? And so I'm going to look at 5 ways that we really can get ourselves into a good argument, and then we'll look at the alternatives. So number 1, expand beyond this issue and bring in every other instance that you can think of that's vaguely similar. So when we start arguing, usually there's something that kind of feels like it's triggered that argument. But I expect you notice that very quickly we can easily bring in all sorts of other things. So we're not really just talking about this issue. So if you want a really good argument, you don't stick to this one. And there was that time when you did this and that thing, and there was that other thing. And we kind of start to drag in evidence, sometimes from years and years ago. And I'm sure if you've been on the receiving end of this, you know how infuriating it is for somebody to be getting at you now about something that may have happened years ago that you kind of felt you dealt with. So this is guaranteed to really inflame an argument. And of course, it doesn't matter when you're doing this how trivial that thing might be or however long ago it was, you can still bring it back into the argument. So the second point is closely related to this, and it's forget the issue, attack the person. So not only have you moved beyond this issue into all sorts of different vaguely related issues, but you're actually now just making it personal. So that kind of you always do this or you never do that. You often behave like this. You're wrong, and we kind of attack qualities, or rather bad qualities, that we see in our partner, and we start to become very, very personal. So this particular thing that we might have actually just wanted to have a conversation about, if we really want an argument, we don't just stick there, we start attacking the person. So the third thing that we can do to have a really good argument is don't listen to what the other person's saying. So, we might begin this argument, or perhaps they did, with something, a particular issue, but we don't need to listen to that if we're going to have a really good argument. We just pick up the tone of their voice. We don't kind of look at, is there any truth in it? We just go for it. We just launch into our side of the argument. And of course, when neither party is actually listening very well, then we're not looking for common ground. So we're dragging in all this stuff from the past, we're dragging in all the personal stuff. We're not really thinking about what's the actual issue here, what's my partner actually saying to me. So number 4, to have a really good argument, is be absolutely sure that you're right and do not budge, even if you realise you're wrong. So sometimes there comes a point in an argument, doesn't there, where you have this little voice of doubt creeps into your head and you think, oh, maybe there's some truth in that. You actually listened for a bit, you heard something, and this little doubt of, maybe I'm wrong, creeps in. But if you really want to keep this argument going and have a really good one, then just ignore that. Just keep going. So don't be prepared to budge. You've just got to hang on and behave as if you're entirely right. And often it'll be easy because you just think that you are. So off you go. No doubt is allowed to creep in, even if it looks a bit true to you. Just push that to one side and keep going. And number 5 in how to have a really good argument, or how to have plenty of arguments, because this one is really about the raw materials of creating an argument. Anytime you feel a slight irritation or dissatisfaction or any negative thought crosses your mind, pick up on it and make something out of it, because this is the raw material that you can use to create an argument. So if you feel a bit irritated by something, you could just let it go. But if you're going to have an argument, no, you've got to grab onto it and mention it to the other person, probably in a certain tone of voice that you know will annoy them. So if you do that with any feeling that's negative at all, then that's an opportunity to have plenty of arguments. So I wonder if, as you're listening to those, any of them sound familiar. We've all been there. We've all done all of those things, I'm sure. And what I want to take a look at now is how we can use those and turn them around to see how not to have that argument. So the basis of how not to have an argument is that we need to know that we will feel better if we don't have an argument. Often we start with the premise of, I need to get them to see my point of view and therefore I will feel better. But I'm going to suggest to you something different, which is, in our relationship, what we're looking for is a good feeling. And if you're looking for a good feeling, then arguing is not the way to get there. Now, that's not to say that there aren't things in our relationship that we will disagree on, that we'll see differently, and that we want to talk about. And we want to get our partner to perhaps see our point of view over. But that's different from having a full-out argument. So the basis for everything that I'm going to talk about from here on is that we're looking for a good feeling in our relationship. And that good feeling is more important than being right. So winning arguments, we sometimes think that's important because we're going to feel better having won an argument and shown that we're right. But actually, good feelings come when we are feeling warmly towards our partner, when we're connected. And that's a better place to find your good feelings than needing to win and needing to be right all the time. So let's have a look at those 5 points again in the light of that new thought of looking for a good feeling. So, number 1, stay with the issue that you're actually talking about and don't extend it to the past and the future, like that time when and another thing. So we talked before, didn't we, about extending and bringing in all this other evidence and other events. When we are having a conversation about something we disagree about, we need to talk about that thing. And when we can talk specifically about that thing rather than all this other stuff that we're just kind of bringing out from our memories, we're much more likely to have a fruitful conversation and to actually be able to stay in a good feeling. Secondly, don't make it personal with things like you always and you never and this attacking the person and forgetting the issue. We need to look for common ground in our relationship. We need to focus on the things that we share and that we like about the other person, not be looking for ways to attack them and making stuff personal. So again, we need to stay with the thing that we're talking about and not start attacking them. Thirdly, we need to listen to the other person's point of view. So remember, when we were trying to have a really good argument, it was important not to listen to what they had to say. When we really want to communicate, when we want to stay in a good feeling with the other person, then we need to get curious about what they're actually saying. And sometimes what they mean is kind of hidden within the word or even behind the words that they're saying. So we need to listen carefully to see what's really going on. And often this alone is enough to diffuse an argument and to calm things down, because when people feel really heard, then they don't need to argue. So, really taking the time to hear what somebody's trying to say makes an enormous difference. And even if you feel they're not listening to you, you starting by listening really carefully to them can change the balance in that conversation. So fourthly, be willing to admit if you're wrong. So remember when we were talking about having a good argument, we said absolutely do not admit, even if you get that little sneaky voice of doubt in your head that you might be wrong and that they might be right, never admit it. It's okay to be wrong. Remember, we're looking for that good feeling. We're looking for connection with this person. And if we can really listen and learn something, hear something new, hear what they're feeling and thinking, then we might see things differently and realize that, oh, I've actually changed how I see that, or actually I misunderstood, or I got that wrong. And to be able to do that rather than feeling that we've got to keep our side of the argument going, whatever we realize, is, this is going to make an enormous difference. So really be open to the fact that there are two sides to this issue, and I can only see my side. And even if I'm not wrong, knowing what their side of the argument is, or their side of this issue is going to be really helpful in resolving it. And finally, recognize that negative feelings and thoughts will come and go, and they don't all need your attention. So rather than picking up on every negative thought and feeling that you have, and feeling that you need to address it and sort it out and tell your partner about it and pick a fight over it, that doesn't need to happen. There are plenty of things that I find myself feeling slightly irritated by that I have really realised just don't matter that much, and that in a few minutes' time I'll have forgotten about it because we'll be on to something else. So I just don't need to bother about them, and I just don't need to pick a fight over them, and I just don't need to rock the boat around them. And sometimes there are things that we feel are important and do need our attention. And then we can use those first 4 steps to address those in a helpful way. But actually reducing the number of things that we even need to kind of come into conflict about at all is just hugely helpful. And I really wonder how, when you start thinking about this, how much you'll notice there is that you kind of pick up on out of habit. That's what I started to notice, that, I have a slightly different view from you on that, so I'm just going to tell it to you. And then I just suddenly thought, actually, I don't have to. Yours is reasonable enough, we'll go with it. And that is transformational in itself. So let's have a recap on those 5 different ways of not having an argument. So number 1, stay with the issue that you're actually talking about, that you started with, and don't extrapolate to all sorts of other stuff. Don't make it personal. Listen to the other person's point of view. Be willing to admit if you're wrong, or if you see something new, or you change your mind. And recognize that not all negative feelings and thoughts need your attention. I hope that you will reflect on these 5 points and just have a think about how that might make a difference in your relationship, and perhaps just start to experiment with these different ways. And don't get too hung up about it. You'll find yourself probably doing some of those things that we talked about at the beginning, how to have a really good argument. But when you do, just notice and get curious about what could be different. I hope you enjoy this exploration.